I'm Luke Kanies. I'm the founder of both the Puppet Project and Puppet Labs, and I'm the CEO of Puppet Labs. So one of the things that's interesting about Puppet is it was actually born at LISA. So I first attended LISA 10 years ago, this conference, 2001, and quickly began attending all the workshops I could, and the config management workshops we were having at the time were very formative in Puppet, both in positive ways in that I learned a lot that I was able to apply to the tools that I built, and in negative ways in which I argued constantly with everybody all the time and decided based on those arguments that it was worth at least trying to build a product. And the first place I ever announced Puppet publicly was at LISA in 2005. I think that was actually the last time I gave a talk at LISA too. And at that conference was a guy named Jeff McCune, who I didn't know at the time. He saw my talk, went on to use Puppet, got enough value from that he began talking about Puppet at various places. He went to a Mac conference, spoke about Puppet there. A guy named Nigel Kirsten heard about Puppet there, started using it at Google. He began talking about Puppet. And then another guy saw one of his talks about Puppet at another Apple conference. This guy was Gary Larissa. All three of these guys are now employees of Puppet Labs working on Puppet full time. And so these talks that I've done at LISA, the work that I've done at LISA has definitely spread to kind of everywhere that has Puppet. A lot of it really started at that first conference here, and a lot of what led to Puppet being created and what led to the features that are in Puppet were based on conversations I'd had with people at this conference. So it's very formative. But I'm not here to talk about Puppet, really. I'm here to talk about DevOps. And initially, I'd like to talk about what DevOps is not, which is development. It's a little bit poorly named because you kind of certainly would assume that it's about development, but it's not. It's also not about developers becoming operations. It's not about kind of joining one team or singing Kumbaya as we all mutually write code and deploy it into production. It's also not about operations becoming developers, right? It's not about all of you suddenly having to learn how to write code all the time and no longer worrying about uptime and always thinking about more programming than operations. And lastly, it's not about not operations. Operations isn't going away. It's not going anywhere. You're not going to suddenly not have sysadmins. You're not going to suddenly not have people who are responsible for the uptime of your system. Now, they may look very different. They may have very different jobs in 5 years than they had 5 years or 10 years ago, but you will always have people whose job it is to make sure the stuff is actually running. It is, however, about improving operations. It's about making operations better. And the primary way that it's about making operations better is through cultural change. It's not about bringing new tools. It's not about it's not about the company changing. It's about the people changing, the people at the company changing. And a major way that you bring that cultural change is by improving the sysadmins themselves, right? So we are operations. Sysadmins are operations. And we can't say that things should change without talking about us changing. Another way that you can really make operations better is by reducing process. Sysadmins tend to have a very engineering mindset, a very rules-driven mindset. I know what I have to do. I know how I have to be. And as long as I follow those rules, I'm doing my job. But in a lot of cases, rules are only there because you couldn't find any other way to get you what you wanted. And so you really want to find ways to minimize process and find other ways to do your work. A great way to minimize process is through better tools, right? So sometimes you can trade off tooling for process, or trade off process for tooling and get more what you're looking for out of the world. But the main way you want to get better is you want to get better at collaborating with the people around you. If you are a sysadmin and you don't work with anybody else, you don't talk to anybody else in your organization, you're not doing what you can for your organization. You're not doing what you can to get your job done better. And by the way, this is supposed to, I just realized about 10 minutes ago, this is supposed to be an hour talk, so I'm going to do my best to stretch it, but don't be shocked if there is lots of time for questions at the end. And I'm certainly happy to take Puppet or DevOps or baby-related questions if you're interested. So I want to talk a little bit about automation because it certainly shows up a lot in DevOps. Again, DevOps isn't about tools. It's not about technology. It's about people. But a lot of what we think of as what we have to do ends up being translated into technology in some way. And automation certainly shows up. So everyone here is a knowledge worker, right? Theoretically, manufacturing was completely automated, but we can't automate knowledge workers, right? And yet in our jobs, we're all realizing that automation is a big part of what we need to be thinking about, a big part of what we need to be doing. And so automation is really there, right? It's either there already or it's coming for you. And you can't avoid it, right? You can't skip it. You can't hide it. You have to learn how to deal with it in your life. Hopefully you have to learn how to embrace it. A big part of why it's coming is scale. We're dealing with scale today that we couldn't conceive of 10 years ago. When I was managing 130 machines in 1999, that was a pretty decently sized infrastructure. And today, that's a blip, right? That's a joke. People are running thousands and tens of thousands of machines all over the place, and it's not even worth talking about unless you've got at least 4 digits. And the scale is very, very fast. It's not just that you have 1,000 machines. You can add 1,000 machines a week, right? Zynga added, for months on end, Zynga added 1,000 machines a week. Imagine calling Dell in 2005 and saying, yeah, so I need 1,000 machines on Monday, and I need them to be working. I need them not just to be on a pallet. I need them to be installed and functional and providing services to my customers on Monday. Completely inconceivable, right? They would definitely have thought you were prank calling them, and you would certainly have not gotten what you wanted out of that. There are still plenty of seats in the audience, by the way, so if you guys are willing to come and step on some people's toes, you can definitely find a place to sit down. Not only that, the services that we're building on these machines are critical. Remember maintenance windows? Remember when you could turn services off on the weekend? You could take 2 days to figure out if your service was, if you were going to be able to do this upgrade. I remember those, right? Like, we don't know, so we're going to spend Saturday trying to deploy, and if that doesn't work, we're going to spend Sunday reverting, right? I went through a lot of those plans. You don't get to do that anymore. What 10 years ago was a crappy, useless corporate website is today 30% or 90% or 100% of your business. And there are no applications that just don't matter anymore for a lot of reasons. So these are all things that are leading to automation, but they don't automatically mean just because they're critical, just because they have to be at scale, just because you have to move quickly, doesn't mean automation is going to remove you from the picture. Right? Financial trading is a place where there's a huge amount of money at stake. You have to move fantastically quickly, and there's a huge amount of data in place. But there are still people, right? And trust me, if the financial firms could get rid of these people, they would. These people have to get bonuses. They have to get paid. They hate that. And I can guarantee you, these financial people, I'm sure you guys are paid well, they get paid better than you, and the firms still can't get rid of them. So why are they not automated? A lot of what they do is automated, right? But these people have a skill. This is like the best video game in the world. And the financial firms are building these video games and paying these people massive amounts of money to play video games for 8 to 9 hours a day, right? Why is that? I think you get to choose. I think you as a sysadmin, you as a person working in operations, you get to pick what kind of sysadmin you're going to be. You get to pick through the course of your career how you want to be. You can be mechanical, right? You can be a person who knows the rules, who knows how to follow the rules, and when given a set of rules, can consistently, almost every time, 9 out of 10 times, 9 out of 100 times, 999 out of 1,000 times, follow those rules perfectly and not make any mistakes. But if you are one of those people, you will be replaced by software. You will be replaced by machinery. Skynet is definitely coming to get you. But AI, the things that are difficult, deciding, thinking, AI is still 10 years away, just like it has been for 50 years. If your special power is that you know all 5 arguments that aren't valid to LS, you are not a key differentiator for your organization, right? It's really cool, and it's a decent interview question, but if it's actually important that the people who you hire know which arguments aren't valid to LS, and that is one of the ways you know if somebody is going to be good at a job in your company, there's a problem somewhere, right? Instead, you need to be good at understanding and deciding. You need to understand what your world looks like, what is normal in your infrastructure, why your infrastructure exists, why the services you're running are there, and why they matter to your users and your customers and your employers. And you need to be good at deciding what to do based on the information you have available. Right? Going back to these traders, they have this huge amount of information coming in all day, and they spend all day absorbing information and then making quick decisions and responding immediately. And then as soon as they do something, the software does all the work, right? They don't have to go and do all the manual work to make a trade. They say, trade, done. So the software is responsible for getting data to them, allowing them to make decisions, and then acting very, very quickly once a decision is made. But the human is critical to this story, right? So the more you can be a sysadmin who is good at understanding and deciding, the more valuable you are to your organization. And the more you are a sysadmin who's good at following rules and knowing what the rules are and not really knowing who those rules impact, the more likely your job is going to be replaced by software. And yes, I used to work with a guy who I thought of the parenthetical between his first and last name was could be replaced with a very short shell script. And in his case, you wouldn't have needed any error checking, because if he was running this script that he ran, if he ran into any problems at all, he would call somebody for help. So this is very common, right? And this is still common. This is old news, right? All of us know automation. All of us know we should be using configuration management. My understanding is that this is the first year that almost everyone is saying they are using some kind of configuration management. We've been talking about this for 10 years, right? The first config management workshop was 10 years ago. We had decent tools. Were they great? No. Were they better than doing it your damn self? Hell yes, they were. And yet, it's just now that the people in the Lisa community are really wholeheartedly adopting configuration management. The scary thing about that is that the Lisa community is the community of early adopters. If you have been to a technical conference, you are an early adopter. If you have ever read a book on system administration, you are an early adopter, right? So we are the early adopters of the systems community, and yet it's taken us 10 years to, in large part, adopt these new practices, these new technologies. We are moving very, very slowly. And while we've been waiting, while we've been going slowly, the rest of the world hasn't, right? The rest of the world has moved very quickly. We can't afford to wait any longer. And if we do, this is what's going to result in the developers taking over the operations roles, right? This is what's going to result in your development teams being given the right to manage your operations. One of my employees in his previous job was exactly that. He was a developer at a company that was providing a software as a service, and they needed to move very quickly. And they couldn't get the performance they wanted out of their operations team. And it wasn't about uptime, right? It was about moving very quickly. And so they took him as a developer and put him in charge of the ops team, and he figured out how to use Puppet to make their whole infrastructure move much, much faster. With the same people, right? It wasn't about swapping out the whole new team and buying better people, right? It was about teaching the operations team how to see the needs of the organization, how to see the needs of the products they were building. So because this is a talk about DevOps, I want to talk a little bit about Agile development. In 2001, a group of very good developers got together and wrote down what they called the Agile Manifesto. And they didn't write down a thing they all thought they were going to do. They all were in a room and talking and arguing and disagreeing and complaining and realized that they all worked in a similar way. And not only did they all work in a similar way, they all worked in a way that everyone across the industry agreed was wrong and was stupid. They were completely breaking all the best practice. And they realized that they were doing this together and that it was dramatically better than what was considered best practice at the time. So they wrote this Agile Manifesto and they said, this is better. What you were doing today is wrong and you should instead do it this way. They didn't do it because they had a plan. They did it because they recognized their own behaviors, right? And I think that one of the things that's worth noting about Agile is that it's not Scrum, it's not extreme programming, it's not Kanban, it's not any of the tools or the ideas or the practices or the processes that we've developed to mean Agile, right? If you go and read the Agile Manifesto, it doesn't talk about Kanban boards, it doesn't talk about cards, it doesn't talk about stand-ups, it doesn't talk about a single piece of practice, it doesn't talk about a single process. It talks about a way of thinking about the world and applying that way of thinking about the world to how you interact with your team and the teams around you. And that's why it's very related to DevOps. So the first major principle in the Agile Manifesto was caring more about individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And this is important, right? Processes matter. Processes exist for a reason. Tools are great. But if your processes get in the way of interacting with the people you have to work with, then they aren't doing their jobs. If your tools are interfering with why you exist as an organization, you've got the wrong tools. This is really important for Agile because they tended to have very, very good tools and very tightly defined processes. In a workflow development method, in the old school workflow waterfall style development, people tended to have very strict processes. I'm going to do this and then that and the other thing. And they weren't very focused on the people who were implementing those processes. And this goes back to the point I was making earlier. If you're a decider, if you're good at understanding and deciding, you don't have to have fixed processes. You don't have to have the world's best tools. If, on the other hand, you're bad at deciding, you're bad at making decisions, then you need processes to double check you, right? They valued working software over comprehensive documentation. If you have the best documentation in the world, docs are great, right? They're really important. They're very, very valuable. If your infrastructure is down, they don't mean a damn thing, right? Your software has to be running. Your software has to work. If you have great docs, but your software doesn't actually do what the docs say, maybe it has the interface and the API that your docs say it has, but the API doesn't do what you want, that's not very valuable, right? You're far better off building software than you are documenting software. If you can only do one, it's easy to pick. We value customer collaboration over contract negotiation. And this one on the face of it doesn't seem as applicable to sysadmins. I think software developers tend to do more consulting. They tend to be more, we're going to bring a team in, build a product, and then move on to the next company. But sysadmins, we have contracts, right? We have customers. We are telling our employers, we will keep your services up. We are telling our employers, we'll deploy your software. We'll keep you stable. We'll keep you secure. We make these claims to our organizations, right? This is our contract. And we have customers. We have people who we're doing things for. We have developers. We have application owners who we deploy software for. And these are our customers. We have users who use the software we deploy. If you are more focused on the promises you've made, on the specifics, right? I told you that I will keep it up, and it's up, and therefore I don't have to help you, right? My contract says I don't have to respond within. If you have a 24-hour SLA of response, and a customer's in your cube saying I need help right now, it's not reasonable to say, look, I've got 23 hours, man. I'm going to go get lunch. You need to help. And then we value responding to change over following a plan. Plans are great, but no plan survives first contact with the enemy. It's unfortunate, but reality often changes right in the middle of when you're doing something important. And this is the case all the time, right? New technologies show up. And if in the middle of doing something, some facts on the ground have changed, you need to be able to adjust to that. And you can't say things like, well, the plan says we don't do that. You need to be able to respond to the change in your world. And maybe your world is different and nothing in your infrastructure ever changes. But in my experience, there's constant change, right? Everything is changing all the time. And you need to be thinking about the change first, not the plan. You need to build a plan, but don't assume the plan's going to last, right? So why did Agile happen? What resulted in these people realizing that a change was necessary and that they should document their change? Why were they working differently than what was considered best practice at the time? Waterfall development was very good at building the right application at building an application under budget and on time, but building the wrong software, right? They'd never talked to the actual customer about what they wanted, and they'd never given their customer the chance to really work with them in the course of development to understand what to build. In operations, we have a similar problem. We're very good at building secure, stable systems that take 18 months to deploy. And the unfortunate reality is that 18 months is often an optimistic case. I have one customer who, before they started using Puppet, they had forgotten how to deploy software organizationally. They had built this complicated system using golden images, which are obviously brilliant, and they couldn't do it anymore. They didn't know how to deploy software because they had built a system that was so difficult but had to follow all the rules. And obviously we made it all magical and perfect with Puppet, of course. We had another customer who it costs them more to deploy software than to write it. Imagine that. Imagine a world, and this is a web shop, right? This is a web company. This isn't military. This isn't banking where you have all these ridiculous restrictions. This is a web company that it costs them. Obviously, they've been around for a while. This isn't a 4-person startup, but it costs them more money to deploy software than to develop it. They have more people involved in that process. It's insane. And I think a big part of what's led to this is people in operations not thinking they need to know why the business exists, not thinking they need to know why this software is important. Why is this update important right now? Why is it important that I focus more on what you want from me, more on the person who's standing there asking me for help, than on the process, than on the rules, than on the plan we've all agreed to follow? I think you get to choose, right? As a sysadmin, every day, you get to choose. Do you want to be a barrier? Do you want to be a person who says, I can't do that? Here's why I can't do that. Here are the rules. We all agreed on the rules, and I'm going to follow the rules preferentially to doing what you need me to do. Or are you going to be focusing on making operations a competitive advantage for your organization? Right? If you're a barrier, at some point, your organization will route around you. Stability and security are the ante. Everybody needs security and stability. The definition of security and stability vary by organization, but that's what keeps you from getting fired, right? That doesn't get you promoted. Being secure, you have to be secure. You have to be stable. But if you can't ever change, then you aren't meeting business needs. And business needs pay your salary, right? No one says, you know what I need at my company? Sysadmins. Don't know why, just need them. You don't exist for operations, right? Your company doesn't exist for operations. And this is just as true about government and nonprofits and educational institutions. The company exists for a reason, and operations, your business is paying you to help enable that. So really we need to see cultural change towards looking at operations like this, seeing the world in this light. And we need to change, right? It's not development. This isn't development's fault. Development has been changing very, very quickly. Now, obviously, they're all wrong and we're still right, but we need to take the first step. We need the ones who step out and say, I want to find a way to fix your problem. I want to find a way to make your life better. I want to find a way to make it easier to get your software in front of our customers and our users faster. It's not the business's fault, right? Yes, there are a lot of cases where executives are complete and utter jackasses. But they're still paying your salary, right? They're still finding a way to do their job. You need to find a way to do your job better. The one thing I'm confident you don't want is the business owners stepping into your operational world and telling you how to do your job better, right? But if you don't want that to happen, the only way from keeping it to happen is that you have to figure out how to do your job better. You have to figure out how to make your world better, or they'll do it for you, right? You have to figure out how to serve the business. So I talked a little about process earlier, and I think in many ways process is it's the bugaboo of the systems world because we both hate it. I think every system I know, right? They all hate process. It's horrible, but we also follow it religiously in a lot of cases. And the most important thing to understand about process is it always exists for a reason. Very rarely does somebody just create a process for no reason at all. And even more rarely does somebody decide, you know what, we need to hire a process czar. We need to hire someone who's going to own process and be mean to us whenever we don't follow it. Something somewhere happened that caused someone to say, let's never do that again. How can we never do that again? And they all looked at each other and they went, well, we could print these pieces of paper and then make people sign off that they did every little piece themselves. And everyone went, I guess we don't have any other ideas. So that's how you develop process, right? Something went wrong somewhere. Look at change management. Who here loves change management? Yeah, you guys have software, right, to do change management for you. That's cheating. So I hear a lot of people complain about change management process in organizations. And what is change management as we're used to seeing it, right? It's the sysadmins describe what changes they're going to make in whatever technical ways they're going to make them. And they go to business people and they say, well, you sign off that this 720-character shell script is going to do what I say it's going to do. And the business person goes, okay. And we go, this is stupid. Why am I asking these people who don't know anything about what I'm doing to sign off that what I'm doing is what I say I'm doing? It doesn't make any sense. Well, it's our fault, right? We didn't give them a way to be confident in the work we're doing. We didn't help them be confident in our work so that they felt like they needed to be part of the process. They needed to have a non-technical sign-off because we in the operations team didn't find a way to give them the confidence they needed without that sign-off. So a big part of the cultural change we need to bring is to find a way to give them confidence, to help them see that they can trust us, that we're thinking what they want us to think, that we're doing what they want us to do, but we're bringing security to the table. We're bringing compliance. We're bringing stability. We're going to bring the changes they want, but they can have confidence in those changes. We're not going to willy-nilly deploy new versions of Apache and bring the whole system down however we want. One of the best ways to bring confidence is to trade out process for tooling, right? You can have great tooling that helps you replace process and give that confidence. Version control is a great example of this, right? We all obviously are using version control for everything we do now, right? But it wasn't so long ago that developers didn't use version control. There were plenty of developers who didn't believe version control was that important. It's overhead. Version control is not for me. I just write code, right? Version control is for somebody else. But they've realized that one of the ways to give confidence that all of your production versions of your application are running the same code, or that the version of the application you tested on your laptop or your desktop, I guess back then it was your workstation, was the same application you tried to deploy in production a week later, right? One of the ways you get that confidence is through version control. You can do all that, you can get the same level of behavior without version control. It's just a huge pain. So that's an example in the development world of getting confidence through better tooling. In the systems world, there are a lot of things we can do too, right? We can build tools to help manage the change control process without having to require sign-off from people who don't know what the heck we're talking about. And tool adoption, I think, is an area where developers and operations people are very different. Developers love new tools. And yes, there's a bell curve there too, right? We're talking about there are a lot of early adopters who adopt much faster. But there's so much change going on in the development world. The leading edge of development moves so much faster than the leading edge of operations. And in no small part, a lot of the things that they're adopting because we keep telling them no, right? Oh, well, you can't have a new server. And the developers go, Amazon will give me a new server. So there's a lot of new technology going on in the development world, but sysadmins are very conservative. And I don't mean that, I'm not talking about politics, right? The definition I like best about conservative is that conservative is somebody who believes that nothing should be done for the first time. I think that applies very well to us, right? Well, I haven't done this before, so I have to move very slowly, be very confident. But you can get confidence in other ways, right? So we need to find ways, we need to change ourselves so that we can get that confidence. We can move faster while being confident. We need to find a way to move very, very quickly without sacrificing the things that we also have to be able to deliver. Because needs are changing faster than we do. And that's what we're finding. One of the reasons that so many operations teams feel under pressure, one of the reasons that we feel like there are fewer sysadmins, even though there are actually far more sysadmins today than there were 5 years ago or 10 years ago, is because needs are changing so quickly, they're putting a lot of pressure on us. They're asking us to add 10 times the number of machines. I've got a customer who's got 5,000 physical machines, and they've got a management problem. They're having trouble managing them all. And so their solution, and you guys are all going to agree this is brilliant, is to add 5 virtual machines onto every physical machine. They're moving much faster, and their goal is to do this, of course, without increasing their budget, right? So they're not going to add more sysadmins. They're just going to ask all their sysadmins to manage 5 times as many machines. Because their world has changed, and they decided they needed to do this. We have to find a way to say yes, right? We have to find a way to give the business what it needs, because if we don't, they're going to do it themselves. And there's a huge amount of discussion about cloud computing right now, right? And I think one of the mistakes almost everyone makes in cloud computing is conflating a bunch of different kinds of cloud computing. But the two that are most important to me are the software as a service. Salesforce is an example. Zendesk is an example. Taking things that aren't your core competency, aren't the things that you are the best at in the world, and having somebody else just do that entirely, right? Salesforce is great. Very few companies treat CRM as their core competency, right? You need to be able to talk to your customers, but it's not critical that you be able to maintain the CRM software, right? Maintaining SAP had better not be your core competency. And so that's a great thing to outsource and to have as a software as a service. But the other kind of cloud computing is self-service. I want to do it myself, right? I don't want to have operations do it. I want my developers to be able to deploy a new application. I want my developers to be able to get a new machine, a new operating system, a new version of this application. I want to go from 5 machines to 500 machines without talking to operations first. This is another kind of cloud computing. And I think, to me, this is the most interesting kind and is the most threatening to operations, right? Because Salesforce, they have sysadmins. The people who were maintaining SAP, well, frankly, I don't know, let's not talk about SAP. But in software as a service, operations doesn't go away in that world, right? Google has sysadmins, and a lot of them. Salesforce has sysadmins. Zendesk has them. Etsy has them. eBay has them. All these services we're talking about, not only do they have operations, they consider operations to be a core competency. They know they have to be fantastic at operations, and so they hire the best, they train the best, they keep them adopting new technology, they keep pushing them all the time. And the other kind of cloud computing, the self-service, the ones where you get to do it yourself, right? Where you get to bring in new technology, where you're a developer, you have a problem, operations says no, you go do it yourself. Or the best case is you're a developer and operations has built a system that allows you to get what you want from the infrastructure without having to talk to people, right? I want new machines, no problem. You're not above your quota, you can do that. I want to deploy a new copy of my application, no problem. Here's a tool that will do that for you while ensuring that it's secure, while ensuring that we have the highest degree of confidence we can that this deployment will work. Right? You can get all these things. You, as the sysadmin, can deliver these to your company. You can give self-service to your organization without pushing them out to other services. So it's really about collaboration. It's about finding a way to understand what your business needs are, understanding what you need to deliver to your organization. And again, operations is not the reason why your organization exists. It's very, very unlikely that you exist to manage machines. You exist to enable people. You exist to enable the purpose for your business, right? The purpose for your organization. So you need to understand who you're trying to help, who you exist to enable, and who you exist to make better at their jobs. And this may sound painful to many of you, but this means you're in the service industry, right? You aren't directly doing something. You aren't directly producing. You are helping other people to produce. And if you don't think of your job as helping people, you need to be afraid of automation. Let's put it like that. So you get to choose, right? You get to figure out every day. You get to decide what kind of sysadmin you want to be. And at some point, if you decide not to decide, it will certainly be decided for you. As predicted, my talk was way shorter than it should have been. It was just about on track for a 45-minute talk, but not exactly for an hour. So hopefully there are a lot of questions about either this or Puppet. But in summary, DevOps is absolutely about operations, and it's about culture, primarily about changing culture, and it's especially about you and all of us. Any questions? All right. Is anybody awake? I'm awake. Okay. You don't have a question. You're just awake. All right. Seriously? Yeah. Okay, good. We got a question here. Good.
Sorry, it's a long walk to the microphone. Tim Kirby from Cray. For the sake of it. I'm just trying to word it right. Somewhere along the line, it started to feel here as though your stance was that we should do everything they ask without saying that may not be the right thing to do. And I just want to make sure that I wasn't hearing that, because I think we have a role, not necessarily as gatekeepers, but as facilitators. Just because somebody thinks, hey, I can go and get a VM and do this.
Right.
Yes, you can, but don't. And there's a point there at which it ties in with knowing what the business is supposed to be doing and understanding the big picture. This is like, I beg my cohorts to try and get into staff meetings of different sections of the company.
Right.
Find out what everybody's actually doing. Not what they're telling up the food chain, somebody says in the budget we think we should do. What are they actually trying to achieve?
Right.
Because
and
we can help that.
It's absolutely not about just doing what they tell you to do, doing what they ask you to do. In fact, if you aren't great at your job, your choices are basically follow the rules or do everything the customer asks. And you don't want to be in either one of those situations. You want to be in a place where you can make intelligent decisions about how to interpret what they're asking, whether what they're asking is completely bonkers, and of course you can't do that. No, you can't have root on all of my servers. But if they come to you and ask for that, then you can reasonably say, why do you need this? What capability are you looking for that you think this would deliver? And then maybe you deliver something that gives them the same capability, but isn't actually the thing that they've asked for, right? And so it's very important that you understand what they're saying and that you decide how to act on that. It's a lot like design, right? So one of the things we're doing at Puppet Labs is we're really pushing our whole organization behind design. And design is about the user experience. It's about not doing what the user wants you to do, not what they ask you to do, but doing what the user needs you to do, understanding the user's actual needs, and interpreting that, not just doing it directly, right? The old famous quote by Henry Ford, if he'd have done what people wanted, he'd have just built a faster horse. So he knew what they actually needed and built that instead. So it's very much about understanding. And to me, again, going back to this is about you becoming better at your job. It's about you. It's about individuals, right? You have to trust yourself, and you can't just mechanically follow rules. So anything that ever sounds like me saying mechanically following your rules, no. Because that's how you get replaced by software. Software is great at mechanically following rules. Humans are great at making intelligent decisions based on complex situations.
RJ LaLumiere from Friend Finder Networks. So I am scared of self-service because, and going so fast and kind of giving people free rein, developers free rein, because it's very easy to get yourself into a technical debt. Yes, it's very easy to get something functional very fast, but backups, documentation, all these non-functional pieces still need to be done, and operations typically takes care of that, but it takes time. And then they're like, oh, we want to deploy this, and we're saying, well, your data's at risk if you deploy it right now. And what are some ways that we can kind of work faster to be able to deploy faster, but still take care of all these non-functional bits that are important, and we know are important, but they may kind of gloss over?
Right. So the first thing is to figure out where your time is going. And most places I've been, people's time is going to things that aren't critical to the business. There are a lot of mechanical parts of your job, a lot of just do this thing a bunch of times, or a lot of what amounts to menial work that you can do, that you can automate. To me, this is the best place to automate. Where is time going, and is that time valuable time? That is to say, is it adding real value, or is it time that is not that valuable? If you can automate it, then make it go away, right? Now you have more time. And this is the time you are reclaiming without increasing budget that you can then reuse and add on to things like building self-service infrastructures, building better monitoring, building more information for the user. So now, obviously, you start somewhere, right? And in most cases, you can't just say, no one do anything, we're going to rebuild the infrastructure to add self-service, right? That's not one of the choices. But you can start small. And I've seen this work again and again and again. Pick a thing, solve that thing. And don't pick 5 things and try to solve 5 things. Pick one thing. Pick a little thing. One of our customers, TransUnion, when they first started Puppet, they picked one file. And they got Puppet managing that single file across their entire infrastructure. And they didn't pick an arbitrary file, right? They picked a file that both changed often, and when it was changed incorrectly, resulted in outages. So they got a huge value for this, and it cost them very, very little. But what it gained out of it was a lot of time and a lot less complaining by users and a lot fewer outages. And that was the seed crystal, right? Now they have Puppet everywhere. It was worth the investment, and now each incremental change is less because they know Puppet a little bit. They have a decent tool base already installed, and they can, over time, add more and more. And whether you're using Puppet or not doesn't really matter. But finding some way to say, I'm going to reclaim some time. We've seen people get, one of my favorite stats is a networking company got 84% fewer user tickets by deploying automation on their workstations, right? 84%. Imagine having, the number of tickets you get from users today, only getting 16% of those. Now, some people don't get any, and that's great, right? But if you get a lot, if you're managing user workstations, dropping by 84% is a really big number. Imagine how much more time you have in the day where you can actually have 4 unbroken blocks to read Reddit. Or do other things, I suppose. So, to me, that's how you start. But, again, backups, they're the ante. You have to do that. But if you have a perfectly secure, entirely stable system that's being backed up all the time and can't deploy software, you're going to get replaced. So you got to find a way.
Self-service of servers or VMs or applications is something that, like in various places, you have actually seen that over the year. And it hasn't been uncommon for the last 10 years to do that. Although it's much more common right now, like with Amazon and the like. Have you seen new areas where you're surprised of seeing self-service? Other than the obvious, software as a service with product, but on the infrastructure as a service.
Are there new areas where I'm surprised?
Right.
Let's see, are there areas where I'm surprised? I don't think that I'm surprised by very much of it. I guess it's everywhere. I think there's almost nothing today that we think of as infrastructure, that we think of as operations, that we should need to be talked to about, right? People are always asking for more resources. Everything about what we do is about maintaining existing resources and adding new resources. And there's study after study that shows most money spent in operations is spent maintaining existing resources. The stat I saw yesterday was, again, it was in the 80 percentile, right? It's something like 80%, 85% of all the money people spent on their infrastructure is spent on maintaining existing infrastructure, not on adding new infrastructure. And that tends to be our focus, right? This is the stuff we care about, and it needs to stay up, and it's our baby, and I love that server. But the people outside the infrastructure don't care about that. And so they're always asking for things, and almost everything they ask for, to me, every time we interact with an outside party, that's an opportunity for us to build self-service. So the things that people usually ask for are new servers. The things people don't ask for but need are a simple way to get code from a developer's keyboard to running in production. And that process is something that we can really help make dramatically better for people, and can also, we can do it in a way that they don't have to talk to us. And I think all of us would love to not be involved in software deployments, right? We'd love to have, maybe not the developers, but the application owners, the people who are responsible for this application in the organization, be able to move the knobs that cause the code to progress from workstation to test to production. So those are things that can be self-service. I don't know that I'm surprised by it at this point, but I'm certainly seeing it. Everyone wants it. And when people talk about cloud computing today and you begin drilling into what do you actually want, right? You're saying cloud computing, but I don't think you know what that's supposed to give you. What they're almost always looking for is self-service. They want to, and what everyone starts talking about is cost. Oh, I don't have to buy servers anymore. Turns out that if you use Amazon for your servers, it's like 7 times more expensive. So that's not a good reason to do it. If you have accountants, you're not doing it for cost reasons, or if you can do basic arithmetic. But what it is about agility. It's about moving quickly, and it's about being able to respond to the needs of the organization. So I see it everywhere. I don't think there's any part of interacting with operations that people aren't being asked, is there some way I can move this faster? Is there some way I can do this more quickly?
Tall microphone. Can you talk a little bit about the intermediate stage? Right now we have a lot of human beings in QA who sign off on accepting the QA stage, and managers who sign off on rollouts. Can you talk a bit about how to automate that and how to increase people's confidence to the point where they're willing to let that go? Yeah.
So the first thing is that there's no such thing as a non-intermediate stage. All of this stuff is asymptotic. You can always be better. You can always move faster. Greg LeMond has a great quote. It never gets easier. You just go faster. There's no done, right? There's no point where you're like, I can relax now. But you can always find ways to make it better. So if you look at anything where you're looking at performance, there's always a rate limiting step. There's always something that's causing it to be slowest. And your goal is not to make it infinitely fast. It's not to remove all friction. Your goal is to make it sufficiently fast, or make it a little bit faster, right? And it may be that speed isn't the most important thing to worry about, but I think in our world today, for a while, speed is going to be the most important thing, one of the most important things to think about. So just like I was talking about earlier, the place to do that is to look at the whole process and say, where is time being spent that isn't valuable? Where is time being spent on things that are primarily roadblocks, like getting over roadblocks as opposed to adding business value? And if that's manual sign-off by people who don't understand what they're signing off, I mean, this is the best example, right? Somebody who doesn't know what they're signing off on, they just have to be asked to sign a piece of paper. That's a great way to say, is there some way, some tool I can build that will give you the same kind of confidence that doesn't have to involve you? But a lot of those are very expensive, right? It's like, oh, well, I can take 6 months to do that. That doesn't make any sense. So if you can do that, that's great. But a lot of people, it makes a lot of sense instead to start with something small and say, can I get some fast wins? Can I take the number of steps from 70 to 30? And maybe the 30 means it still takes almost the exact same amount of time, right? Because those 30 were all of the actual large steps. All the work was done in those 30. But having 40 less steps in a process, even if those steps were 5 seconds long, is a huge, huge win. And it gives the team around you confidence that you can succeed, right? They've seen you say, I'm going to make this better. I'm going to make this different. They've seen you do it, and they've seen the reward that they get from doing that. So when you go back the next time and say, I'd like a month this time. I don't want 5 minutes. I want a month. I want to spend time making a big change. Then you're going to have real credibility, which otherwise is very hard to do. It's hard to walk in the door with credibility, right? At the very least, you have to be extremely stubborn if you don't have any other track record. So I would start small. And if you can start with the small important bits, that's great. And if you only have large important bits and small unimportant bits, then do a bunch of small unimportant bits. Build some credibility. And another great way to start, especially for sysadmins, right? Developers often don't get this. Well, developers, if you ask a developer how they bring new technology into their organization, they start in their test code. They start in their IDEs. They start in places that don't make it into production. For operations, we have a similar thing, only all of our world is production usually, but instead we can't start messing with development because you want development to look like production, right? You want to have some confidence that software that works in development will also work in production. So our option is we can start messing with DNS. We can start messing with backups. We can start not messing with in the sense of like, let's twiddle these bits and see if it catches on fire. But in the sense of we can push new technology there first because we don't have to ask anybody's permission. Really, no one cares how you maintain DNS as long as it works. No one cares but you. So bring new technology there. Reclaim your time there. Give yourself, first, the time to spend on the things you want to spend. But second, be able to go to your business and say, here's what happened when I did this, right? We had these user tickets. We had these outages. We had these slow responses to users. And because I invested here, I got this time back. I had more time. My users saw a performance difference even though they didn't ask for this, even though they didn't realize that I was doing this. So that gives you that same kind of credibility, and it gives you muscle memory, right? Now you learn, now I know how to, I know how this feels. I know how to do this. Now I know how to talk about it. I know how to train other people on it. I don't think in my entire history I've seen an organization start with a team gets together and all agrees, we're going to bring automation, we're going to bring new technology, and succeed. I don't think I've ever seen it. I've only ever seen one person say, God, this sucks. I'm going to do something a little bit different for a little while and see if I can make it better. And they do. And in 6 months, they've made meaningful difference. And then 6 months after that, the whole team is doing that. And then 6 months after that, the whole department is doing that. And then 6 months after that, the whole organization is doing it. Right? Again and again and again. I've been doing this for 6 years now. Every single time I've seen people adopt automation successfully, it's gone in these stages. Right? So don't try to boil the ocean. It's not going to work. Can't get a Bunsen burner big enough. Any other questions? And I'll be at the Puppet booth at various times later today, so feel free to come and harass me there. And all right.